Hello, guys, and welcome to the Money Mike's podcast, episode one, the all anticipated episode one. Again, sorry for the delays, guys. There was a few technical issues that prevented me from pushing this out earlier, but we're here and I'm ready to go. So, I'm your host, Money Mike's, and in this episode, I really want to break down from an unbiased, fact-based, truth-based point of view as to what exactly is taking place in Afghanistan. Now, I know for most of you have seen the news by now, and if you haven't seen the news, hopefully I can shed some healthy light as to what is going on. Now, before I dive into this, I do want to say that this podcast is not in any way to bring sadness, to bring any glorification of any of the parties involved on either side of this situation, the Afghanistan crisis. This podcast is designed just to share facts and truth as to exactly what's going on, how you can equip yourself with knowledge and an understanding on how to navigate through this crisis if it affects you or indirectly affects you. And on that note, I just want to say to all of the people of Afghanistan, I am really sorry for what's happened to you. Words, of course, will never be enough. And we definitely do want to put some actions, and we'll be working on something that we can do to provide aid and support to all of you affected. And even for those of you who are indirectly affected, I really do apologize, and I'm sorry to hear what has happened. And maybe some of the things I may say might bring up some pain. I really don't mean to do so. I really just want to share the truth and be able to help millions of people understand exactly what is going on when it comes to the Afghanistan crisis. Now, speaking of the crisis, again, for those of you listening, many of you have seen the news, and the news as to what we have right now is we have an emergency evacuation taking place. The US, the Biden administration, and Joe Biden himself, Prime Minister of the United States, has announced that he is withdrawing all US troops from Afghanistan by the 31st of August, which is, from the current time in the UK, 6 days left. So there's just 6 days left to withdraw all personnel, all staff, anybody who worked with the US during the 20-year period who have visas and rights to work in the US or in other allied countries. Right now, there's a massive logistics situation which is taking place that are being handled by the brave soldiers who are risking their lives every single day to bring order and security at the same time. Now, for the soldiers, I know it's been very difficult because, as we're going to see just in a moment here, there's already been some deaths, primarily because of the desperation of the Afghani people who do not want to be under the rule of the Taliban, after experiencing what that can be like. For many of the people who are around from 1996 to 2001, and even in between during the periods of war and different provinces being taken over and then fought over, the terror, the trauma, the anxiety, and all the other emotions that have been brought from the Taliban's political reign and onslaught and brutal military force has really left an effect on the people, where it's clear that the Afghan people do not want to be a part of a already broken country now falling into the hands of what is considered to be the antithesis to their beliefs and their way of life. So let's have a look here on that note to see what's happened. This is courtesy of DW News, and let's see exactly what's happened here.
Right outside the airport in the week since Taliban militants seized control of the Afghan capital.
People coming here risk their lives. The tense situation at Kabul airport erupted early Monday morning into more violence. Unknown assailants exchanged shots with Afghan, US, and German military at the northern gate of the airport. Numerous people have already lost their lives outside these gates. Thousands are still attempting to leave the country and are swarming outside the compound's fences. At times, people tried to enter the airport any way they could. On Sunday, 7 people lost their lives in a panicked crash at the gates. There have since been several reports of missing children after families were separated amid the chaos. Facing a storm of criticism, US President Joe Biden once more defended US efforts to evacuate people from Kabul.
Okay, so just from that full 45-second piece, you can really hear the commotion, the anger, the protest, and just the different emotions. You can really feel and see what is going on. And I will leave the link for this in the description beneath so that you guys can watch the full thing. Now, already there is a lot of pressure because of the imploding situation that's causing an implosion on not just the people, but of course the economy and the world, okay, to some degree. Now, when it comes to financial markets, which we'll come to in a minute, we haven't really seen an effect. We haven't heard any news. There hasn't been any real major effect of what's going on in Afghanistan to, okay, the financial markets. Okay, so I want to put your mind at ease already. But however, there are things in the pipeline which definitely may affect where we are right now. Now, currently, with Biden's decision, there are many things he has said. One thing that has stood out to me, which I believe is every president, especially of the United States, has to deal with, is hard decisions. There are times where hard decisions have to be made. No matter how powerful the country is, there are things that just have to be said and sometimes have to be done now. Whether I agree or not with the withdrawal by the 31st or withdrawal at all, is not a conversation that I'm trying to go for. I'm trying to leave any bias out and simply share the truth and hear your thoughts and your comments and give you a place for you guys to share in freedom. So at the situation that we have right now, one of the major things that we need to turn towards is, again, the Afghan people, okay? Because in the midst of all of this, the US and allied forces have suffered losses. Both sides have suffered losses, but the Afghan people are caught in the middle and in the brunt of this. And they're really the people who are facing this most severe losses, okay? Now, I will come back to what Biden has said and to share his addressing to the nation. He has done more than one, but let's just have a look and see as to what's going on and what we're looking at in terms of the panic and the scare, okay? Now, there is a term that's been coined by news media here, and I really want to pull this up because it's an important point, okay? Now, France 24 is a fantastic source of news. I really do like to listen to them because of the way they lay out the news, okay? And it's a good place for us to look at different things. Now, they're not the only news source, but it's just one that I personally like. Now, this was issued on the 17th of August 2021, just 1 minute past 8:30, and it's called the Taliban 2.0. Now, just to pull back here to understand this phrase, in order for there to be a 2.0, there must have been a 1.0. Now, Taliban 1.0 is the predecessor to the new face that was seen, or the new portrayal of what was seen as the Taliban. Now, one of the notable things that I've seen throughout the media from Taliban spokesmen and important people within the Taliban political infrastructure is more of a tone of political stance and political rhetoric and approach towards how they deal with the media and with people, compared to their more brutal militant approach, which is what Taliban 1.0 was about. Okay, now it's even gone as far as Taliban leaders discussing things as to women are allowed to go back to work and take roles and different things like that, which Taliban 1.0 was an absolute no. And so many people are afraid that the Taliban, after all these years, 20 years specifically, have not changed their idea of their strictness of the Sharia law and of Islam. Now, the Taliban follow a type of Islam called Deoband Islam, which is a stricter, more harsh approach to the application of Sharia law. Okay, and at the height of this, between 1996 to 2001, before the US invaded Afghanistan after the 9/11 bombings, okay, there were many rules implemented by the then, if you want to call it, Taliban 1.0. Okay, things like as far as burn the land, a lot of land was destroyed because those who opposed the Taliban would burn their land to make sure that they remove any assets that the enemy may have in terms of land for food or for cattle or for resting, to make sure they get rid of them eventually. Okay, so many of the people in the last generation, the last 20 years, experienced untold amounts of horror under the hands of a political and military movement with beliefs founded in things to do with not only Islam, but with Marxism and communism. Okay, and the reason for that is the influence from the Soviet Union. Now, the history of that stems back very far. We're talking into the 1970s and the 80s. Okay, the Soviet Union, okay, supported the then government. Okay, and we had the Mujahideen, who was the rebel force or the guerrilla force, which was armed by the CIA to take on, okay, that previous government structure, and they won. Now, without going into all the details, there has been a lot of things that have happened, okay, but to where we are right now, we've seen a very murky history of fights for power and things of that nature. Now, the term Taliban 2.0, moving forward from the bloody history, was seen within the realms of news, Taliban spokesmen, and the Taliban soldiers themselves, seemingly trying to portray a different image from their predecessors, over from the bloody, gory, militant imagery of warriors into a more political stance, looking for peace, and even down to things as far as women's rights being allowed, which again, for most people, they do not believe. They believe once you're Taliban, you're always Taliban. And others are saying that possibly there may be change being erupted and that they don't want war themselves. They've also suffered losses and etc. But ideally, this coin term, Taliban 2.0, as France 24 has rightly said, militants are seeking to revamp their image for a bid for legitimacy, which is what I do believe. I believe that if there was a strategy or a Trojan horse strategy for the Taliban to reintroduce themselves to the world, it would be right now through political legitimacy. Now, already we've seen countries like China form strategic alliances with the Taliban. And I'll just show you right here. Now, China pledges support for Taliban in landmark invitation to Beijing. So this is written by Joe Wallen, 20th of July, 2021 at 8:32. Now it reads as a subheading, militants invited to foreign ministry in Beijing in first official meeting with overseas governments since major offensive launched in March. So in other words, Beijing has invited over Taliban leaders, okay, which has blustered their legitimacy, at least with China and with countries who are allies to China. And now the world is watching. Okay, so this political move and political stance rather than a military stance, which for many is Taliban 1.0 or the Taliban that we know's main approach of brute force, military action, and then establishment of laws and regulations according to their customs. But we're seeing a very different approach where it seems as though, I know it's a funny word to use within the realm of politics, but the Taliban 2.0 seemingly wants to become interoperable and be able to be having multilateral relationships with different partners and countries around the world. Now, again, for the West, after fighting a very bloody battle, most people and even Afghan citizens do not believe this and believe that rather this is a Trojan horse, okay, for the Taliban to enter into power and then assume control and then continue to establish laws that they've always believed in from the beginning. Now, I will personally say time will tell. Okay. Me growing up, I grew up during the period of the beginning of 9/11. I believe I was 6 years old, I think, when, or 6 or 7 when 9/11 happened. And from that 20 years, it's been a very bloody battle that I've seen. So personally, for me, if you wanted to know Money Mike's opinion, I'm watching to see what we're going to see unfold in these days and weeks to come, as the Taliban clearly is seeking to go for its route towards legitimacy. Now, you have to understand that the Taliban, since 2001, are under US sanctions. Now, I believe a few of their leaders have been removed from UN sanctions, but as a whole, as a conglomerative, they are under UN sanctions, which means there's certain rights or that countries have that they do not have access to. So, for example, they haven't got access to special drawing rights from the IMF, or they're not eligible to receive aid. They're not eligible to have foreign deposits. Okay, for example, in US dollars or other currencies. In terms of trade, they're barred from any time of formal legal trade. Okay, but that hasn't stopped them. You know, we will discuss this in just a moment, but even though the Taliban have been restricted on every side financially, they still managed to support themselves for over 20 years outside the realm of, you know, being on the US sanctions list. They've still managed to fund themselves. Now, because of the structure of how Afghanistan is, there are certain agricultural projects like opium, which have supported their move. And we'll come back to that. But I want to play you a clip right now, just for you to understand where we are when it comes to the Taliban and what we're moving towards. And I'm trying to make sure that we get the best of the understanding of where we are. So let's have a look. I'm going to show you what we've seen here with the Taliban, just for you to understand what it means when it comes to the Taliban 2.0. So I'm going to play this now. Have a listen.
موږ به انشاءالله د شریعت په چوکاټ کې ښځو ته د کار او فعالیت اجازه ورکوو. ښځې د ټولنې مهم عنصر ده او موږ دې ته په درناوي ګورو. د ټولنې په ټولو هغه برخو کې چې موږ ټولنه اړتیا ورته لري، ښځې به فعال حضور ولري. زموږ د مشرانو لخوا نه جدي بحثونه روان دي او په نږدې راتلونکي کې به موږ د دې شاهدان واوسېږو چې سیاسي جوړښت منځته راسي او یو قوي اسلامي هر اړخیز او افغانانو ته د منلو وړ نظام ولرو.
Okay, now, unless you understand Pashto, you wouldn't have understood what he said, but I can play you the video. I'll leave the clip in the description below so that you guys can go and find out what he said. Now, if you understand Pashto and that dialect, what he said, which was in subtitles, is very straightforward, word for word. Women will be allowed to assume roles and have rights to work. And I'm guessing also, on a side note, if they have rights to work, then most likely they'll have rights to school. Now, famously, we know of a story of a young girl. She's a woman now, who was shot in the head, okay, because of trying to go to school. Her name is Malala Yusafazi. I hope I've said her name correctly. But October the 9th, 2012, she was shot in the head for attempting to go to school, okay, when she was told not to go to school. So this is the Taliban 1.0 that most people know about. And what we're hearing here now, of course, it's not in English, it's in Pashto, but you can read the subtitles. He's saying that women will have active roles within society and be able to work and etc. Now, he hasn't said in what roles. I guess from what it looks like, is purposefully being left out for now. And if they have rights to work, we can assume that they're going to have rights to go to school and have education, because they're going to need education in order to fulfill roles. Okay, now I'm just going to play one more here, and then we can move on from this point here. And this is from the main spokesman, which most people have seen in the media. It's a very short clip. I'm going to play it for you guys to hear, and then we're going to continue.
With days to go until the deadline for troop withdrawal from Afghanistan, in the midst of a humanitarian crisis, the Taliban agreed to meet Sky News in Doha and issue this stark warning. If the US or the UK wanted to extend the 31st of August deadline in order to continue evacuations out of the country, would you agree to that?
No.
Why not?
This is something you can say it's a red line. President Biden announced this evening that 31st of August they would withdraw all their military forces. So if they extend it, that means they are extending the occupation. While there is no need for that, I think it will deteriorate the relation that will create mistrust between us. If they are intent on continuing the occupation, so it will provoke a reaction.
Let's talk about the situation at the airport. People are very afraid of what life may look like under your rule. People are prepared to leave everything behind. They're prepared to risk their lives to leave the country. What would be your message to them?
First, I assure you, it is not about their worry, and not about their sphere. This is about they want their demand to resettle in Western countries, and that is a kind of economic migration, because Afghanistan is a poor country and 70% of the people of Afghanistan are living under the line of poverty. So everyone wants to settle in Western countries to have a prosperous life. So that is, it is not about fear. Of course, for their justification to go there, they exaggerate, scare, and terrified, and so. So we know the Afghans. This is our society. This is not the fact we are saying.
We're hearing reports of members of the Taliban going door to door looking for people like journalists, like members of the judiciary, former government workers. We're hearing that girls' schools have been closed in some provinces. What are you doing about that?
All fake reports. If anyone is, as you say, and we investigate every incident, who is going door to door, he himself will be prosecuted and tried and punished, because that is a violation of our policy. But I can assure you, there are many reports by our opponents claiming what is not based on realities.
And as we now approach the date for American, British, foreign forces, soldiers to leave Afghanistan, what would you say to the families of those who died trying to help Afghanistan?
I first of all say they occupied our country. If we occupy your country, what you will say? If I killed your people in your country, what you will say? I think our people suffered a lot, bloodshed, destruction, everything. But we say the past is the past story, a part of our past history. Now we want to focus on.
Now, that was a very different interview and has shocked the world. That video that I've played, the link will be also in the description. So many people have seen that video and have been very shocked at this response because we know that the Taliban always takes revenge. And he said something very profound, excuse me, which is the past, let the past be the past. And that they're in essence trying to move forward politically to restructure Afghanistan in the way that they see fit, but seeming to have more relaxed laws around life in general. Now, to understand this, I was only 7 years old, but growing up, I did read into it. And again, I have touched back on this point that Taliban 1.0 was a very brutal force, unforgiving, taking revenge against their enemies and never wanting to look weak. But in fact, he did not say that he's sorry for their losses, but rather he's saying the past is the past, which is not the Taliban most people know of and are very, of course, very shocked about. Okay, so for those of you who are wondering what Taliban 2.0 is and what that means, now you know. Now let's continue here. I want to dive a bit more into the Afghani economy to understand exactly what he said. Now, he touched on a point about Afghanistan, calling Afghanistan a poor country. Now, economically speaking, at the moment, they're a poor country, but in terms of their actual wealth that they potentially have, or their potential wealth, is quite vast. Okay. Now, with every negative thing, I always like to talk about the positive. So let's dive straight into this. Now, before I go on to the structure of the Afghan economy, I just want to lay a few points out here for you to understand the dynamic of Afghanistan. So taking this from CS Monitor or Christian Science Monitor, this is an article from June 14th, 2010. And I have a similar article, okay, from the World Archives, which is from the New York Times, which is June 13th. So they're a day apart. And this is from 2010, and I'll read. US and Afghan officials claim to have discovered more than $1 trillion in untapped copper, iron, and lithium deposits in Afghanistan, enough to significantly bluster the future development of the war-ravaged country. Okay, now, of course, Afghanistan, and the Afghani people are very poor. As he said correctly within the video, 70% of Afghanistani citizens live below the poverty line. They live on $1.90 or less per day, okay, and are really struggling. Now, because of a war-ravaged country, of course, you wonder, all of these deposits, how come we haven't seen any of them? Well, when there is war, it's very difficult to have any, in order for you to have any success when it comes to accessing untapped wealth in the form of natural resources, you're going to need two things. You're going to need transportation and you're going to need security. Now, in that 20 years, and even beforehand, there hasn't been much of that whatsoever. And so Afghanistan is a country which is sitting on wealth, but above ground is very poor because of the political structure. And I just want you to see the picture here that you could be naturally wealthy in a country, but the socio-economical climate, the geopolitical climate can cause you to be absolutely poor. So for those of you who, on a side note, who are not really involved in politics or not really interested in it, Afghanistan is a very good example of how politics can cause a nation to be poor. Okay, now for us in the West, because we have quite democratic countries, and policies are quite fair to certain degrees, although to the West, I would say there's a lot more natural resources towards Asia and Africa, more than in Europe, but the policy set in place does allow for there to be a movement of wealth with a lot more ease than in countries like Afghanistan, which, being the seventh poorest country in the world, could become a lot more if there was good infrastructure, politically speaking, and then allowing for money and investment, FDI or foreign direct investment, to come in. Now, on a side note here, Afghanistan really has had investment primarily from China. China has invested 3 billion. This was in 2007. for the ENIAC mines, the copper mines, a 30-year lease to be able to develop those mines for copper. And also India has also the Steel Authority of India has also won contracts to mine iron or explore the vast amounts of iron ore which are available in near Kabul, near between Herat and Kabul, for their very large veins of iron. Okay, so there has been a few, and that was in 2010/11, but really we haven't seen much FDI, foreign direct investment, come into Afghanistan because it's just simply too dangerous, and the logistics of movement is just too difficult to get things going. Okay, and the country, of course, as a poor country, doesn't have the infrastructure and the money to be able to pull on these resources. Now, according to my notes here, Afghanistan has a lot more than just copper, iron, and lithium. Now, there is an article, and it's from the New York Times, and I will bring this up in a moment here. I'll switch over for you guys to see. Now, if you want to check out Internet Archives, there's a really cool place you can go to. It's called the webarchive.org. It's called the Internet Archive or the Wayback Machine. And you can look for certain articles and it will allow you to be able to find these articles. Now, this one was written by James Risen, and this is June 13th, 2010. Now, I just want to lean on a very important point. Okay, now the US officials that went there were a small group from the Pentagon. Now, I'm going to read this paragraph here for you to understand the gravity of what Afghanistan has in terms of its natural and potential wealth. An internal Pentagon memo, for example, states that Afghanistan could become the Saudi Arabia of lithium, a key raw material in the manufacture of batteries for laptops and Blackberries. Now, of course, in 2010, there wasn't much scope and understanding for green energy, but lithium is a powerful component in this new age of the automobile, which is towards green energy. Lithium is the vital component that we need in order to have those batteries to have electrical cars. Okay, so again, just that phrase alone. Now, some political scientists say that this is so far back that the numbers are kind of iffy and here and there, but I definitely do say that for sure they have found something, and I don't think it's insignificant, but it hasn't been really easy to tap into Afghanistan's resources. The only countries, again, that have China first, which is an of course thing, and then India also. Now, with the Taliban 2.0, how are we linking this together? With the structure of, or what the tone and persona that the Taliban 2.0, coming from the major spokesman, what their aim is to do, to come from a more political approach, this may actually, in the long term, cause the country to be opened up for development, because some countries will want to work with the Taliban government, and that will allow for there to be deals made and for mining to take place, and could lift Afghanistan out of poverty in the long term, potentially. It depends really on what happens with the Taliban government and how real the Taliban 2.0 image they're portraying is established. Okay. Now, according to my notes here, Afghanistan also has coal, copper, iron ore, of course, we've talked about, and lithium, uranium, rare earth metals, chromite, gold, zinc, talc, barite, sulfur, lead, marble, precious and semi-precious stones, natural gas, and petroleum. So already from what we can see here, Afghanistan as a nation is very materially rich in terms of what we have under the earth. But again, above the earth, it is the seventh poorest nation. So on that point here, I want to switch over and discuss what we have in terms of the economic infrastructure of Afghanistan. Okay. Now, when it comes to Afghanistan and the economic infrastructure, the most important points here is to understand Afghanistan as a nation, okay, in terms of imports and exports, in terms of the GDP, nominal, and also the GDP per capita and the PPP adjusted version, for us to understand exactly what we have going on. Now, in terms of Afghanistan as a country, it's important for us to understand again, one of the biggest things that can happen as a revolution, financial revolution for Afghanistan, would be a revolution in the mining sector. Okay, now we know that because of war and the situation that's occurred because of the war, we haven't really had an Afghanistan of that nature. So I want to show you what we have here. So this is from Reuters, okay, and this was an article that I've been looking into, okay, a very important one, dated August the 6th. All right, and it reads, millions of Afghans are struggling to put food on the table as prolonged drought disrupts supplies in a country reeling from a surge in violence as US-led foreign troops complete their withdrawal. And organizations of aid calling on donors for urgent funds and humanitarian assistance, with an annual wheat harvest expected to plummet by half or by nearly half, and millions of livestock at risk of death as water supplies run dry. Okay, now what it has come down to in terms of geographically, I'm hearing reports that really some of the Afghan farmers are looking for or have been dependent on the snowfall, which comes from the mountains and will melt and turn into water, and then in turn be able to be used for irrigation and to also quench the thirst of their livestock. All right, now we have a very serious issue here already at hand, and it's very important to see exactly what is taking place here. Honing in on the economic condition and the economic infrastructure of Afghanistan, there is a few things that are important to clear up here. So first of all, Afghanistan has been through a lot as a nation. Of course, war is an obvious number one, but there's also the global pandemic, which affected every country around the world. Okay, we've also had the infighting, okay, and the conflict between different Afghani tribes. Now, Afghans are a very tribal people. There are many different types and different tribes spread across Afghanistan in different places, from the Pashtun to the Tajik, Balok. There's very different regions with different systems of local law, okay, and de facto laws that occur within each place. Now, Afghanistan as a country, before we talk about the economic infrastructure in more detail, is a country which, factually speaking, has known division for a very long time in terms of policy and law, okay, because elders of each community of the tribe have different beliefs and different cultures. Some are more Muslim, some are maybe deviations of that. Okay, now by population, Islam is by default the major religion of the country. I believe 99.7% of Afghanistani people are Muslim. Okay, there's reports that there is a few Jews. There is one Jew left who takes care of the only synagogue in Afghanistan, and there are about 500 to 8,000 Christians by CIA report. When we look at Afghanistan, a country divided against itself, and there is a very famous phrase which says that a country divided by itself, or divided against itself, I should say, will never stand, or a kingdom divided by itself will never stand. And this is what we see with Afghanistan. There are very different laws that from Kabul to Kandahar and then into the rural areas of Afghanistan, which I do believe is a major reason as to why Afghanistan is the way it is. We haven't really seen much unity between the leaders. And this was the point that Joe Biden was actually making, which he said his justification for withdrawing US troops is that he was saying that the Afghan leaders need to learn to work together instead of working against each other, which I personally do agree with. I think the war in Afghanistan that the US and coalition forces have fought really is an ideological war more than just a physical military war. I think the ideology, you can't kill ideology with bullets. That's what I personally believe. And I think the ideology, the mindset of the people is really what is causing them to be so behind. Now, Afghanistan is the 7th poorest country in the world. But in terms of the wealth that is within this country, as we've just discussed, there's over $1 trillion worth of real true value hidden not too many meters beneath the earth that the Afghans walk on. So if you want to put it this way, their wealth is literally sitting beneath them, but the political climate above the ground is stopping them from really having access to the wealth that they should have. Okay, because the infrastructure is poor. Okay, the security risk is some of the highest anywhere in the world, and the constant infighting, the constant battle between who's boss has caused Afghanistan to really be behind from where it should be. As a country with a lot of natural wealth, it's very sad to see the climate that we have here. Now, speaking of climate, I think one point that's important to tackle here is the understanding of where Afghanistan lies in terms of its location within Asia. Now, we know it's an Asian country, or hopefully you should know that it's an Asian country, but I would like to just show you here. I'm going to use Google Earth to show you where Afghanistan lies and what this means. Now, two major topics that are important to discuss here. Number one is going to be China, and number two is going to be Iran. And the reason I'm going to be pointing out these two countries is because, again, as we can see, because of socio-economical issues, political issues, okay, geopolitical issues, Afghanistan, being a landlocked country as well, is trapped in a situation where it's surrounded by other countries who all have their alliances or differences. Okay, and already with Afghanistan's economic infrastructure here, there is a lot of tension, but then a lot of opportunity that can come from the community or come to the community from the international community and more the local community of Asia at large. Let's have a look at Afghanistan. I have it in my search history here already. All right, and we have it highlighted here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw out a pen here so that you can understand the dynamic of and the gravity of what I'm saying. So let me pull up the annotation tools here. Let's get this. I'll get a nice blue color. All right, so speaking of Afghanistan, first thing that's important, wait, hold on, let me just get rid of this so that we have more space. There we go. Now, when we speak about Afghanistan, most important thing to remember is that it is a landlocked country. So geographically speaking already, when we look at Afghanistan here, it's landlocked with 6 countries. Now, if we're going to start from here, I want to start from the west, okay? And then we go over to the east. All right. So on this border right here, this is the border between Afghanistan and Iran, okay? And that's all you need to know for now. So just keep that in your mind as we move forward. Now, as we move down towards the south and to the southwest, okay? So stretching all the way from places like Peshawar, I hope I'm saying that right, you know, near Islamabad, all the way down to where we are, even down to Quetta. This is towards the south and the southwest. Afghanistan is landlocked with Pakistan. Now, this is where we are right now. Now, my lines may move here, but this is what we have going forward when it comes to Afghanistan. All right. Now, towards the north, okay, and towards the northeast, starting with the north, we have here Turkmenistan. Okay. If I drag this up for a minute, my lines may move. We also have Tajikistan, okay, towards the direct north here. Now, there's one that's on this map that might not be very clear to many, all right, but we have here Tajikistan. Here we go. Now, again, this is right here, so I'm going to keep this line here. I hope you guys are following me. And over here, we have Uzbekistan, okay, put a line here. So we have Turkmenistan, Iran, Pakistan, Tajikistan, many stans, no, I'm joking, and Uzbekistan. Now, there's one stan which is also landlocked with Afghanistan, which most people are not too familiar with. And I'm going to use a different color here for you guys to see exactly what we're talking about. Now, China or Chinastan, no, I'm joking. All right, so China has a very small border, okay, with Afghanistan, which most people are not aware of. Now, even when I found this out, it was very interesting as to what exactly is going on here. I didn't know that China was that big or Afghanistan was that small or somewhere in between. But anyway, This area right here is called the Wakhan Corridor, okay? Wakhan Corridor. And this Wakhan Corridor stretches for about 60 to 70 kilometers, all right? And it gives access for China to get it directly into Afghanistan. Now, at the moment, in terms of infrastructure, there isn't a direct road, okay, to the capital or towards Kabul, all right? There is no direct road, so there isn't a road at the moment, okay? Now, there are roads in Pakistan because Pakistan is heavily in relationship with China, okay, and more of a creditor to debtor nation with China, between China and Pakistan, all right? And at the moment, Pakistan is basically extended infrastructure for China. Now, there's not enough time to go through all the details of that. We can do that in another session and podcast. But at the moment here, we have no road. Now, the reason why there is no infrastructure is because of one simple reason: very poor security, very dangerous for you to be. Now, we saw just a moment ago that Afghanistan around Kabul going towards Kandahar are very dangerous areas. Now, again, speaking about Afghanistan and the structure of the country, again, it is a very wealthy country. Even though those reports from the US officials and the Afghan officials was 11 years ago from today, at least from what we can see here, I definitely think it would be true that there's at least $1 trillion worth of wealth sitting right underneath Afghanistan. Now, China is the largest consumer in the world and also the largest exporter, largest producer in the world. Now, China needs materials. It needs raw material in order to make the products that we all enjoy and love so much. Now, Afghanistan is literally, no pun intended, a gold mine, but not only a gold mine, but a treasure trove of so many different, very important materials, okay, raw materials and resources that the world needs. And if we're bringing it a bit more closer to the local area, these 6 countries around Afghanistan need, okay? So when we look at this picture that we have from Google Earth, you can see that Afghanistan is right in the middle of a lot of geopolitical tensions with things of different magnitudes, number one. But I just wanted to get the picture here as to what the end goal is. Now, Afghanistan, because it's a landlocked country, is limited to only land travel. Okay, now, if you're not too sure about what China is working with right now, China is trying to make a new Silk Road, okay, to extend China's exporting ability to the whole world with as much simplicity as possible. Now, at the moment, Afghanistan is a liability due to the security issues. And with the US pulling out of the country right now, it's going to be very difficult for China to be able to build infrastructure. So from the Wakhan corridor here, about 60 to 70 kilometers, moving into Kabul, it would have been very good for there to be a road. Now, why is that? Now, Iran and China have struck a very important deal, okay? And this was March 17, 2021, which we're going to look at in a moment, worth $400 billion. Now, this is a 25-year cooperation plan to strengthen their strategic relationship that they already have to do with things of nuclear power and etc. And now, if you look to the west and then over towards the northeast here, you have a picture where China and Iran are one country away. So if they could meet in the middle here to get to Kabul, this would be a fantastic journey route for the future where Iran and China can have a mutual beneficial benefit. Now, this mutual benefit will, of course, offshoot to the people of Afghanistan all along here. Now, the only problem, again, at the moment is security. Now, China made a very interesting move, which I'm going to also show you in a moment. Okay, and this is dated July 28th, 2021. So just this year, okay, to do with the Taliban and the now ruling political party until further notice. When we look at what we have here from the infrastructure, if China could some way make a road that goes directly to Iran through Afghanistan, not only would they be able to take advantage of the mineral wealth within Afghanistan, but they have a direct route to their good pal, Iran. So at the moment, with the US pulling out, with the withdrawal, people have been asking me this question, will China move in? Well, personally for me, I don't think so. China is a country who uses money as a weapon, I believe personally, more than they use human beings. Okay, so I don't think that they will be sending any of their soldiers in there to bring any sort of peace. If the US, okay, have pulled out, I don't see why China would want to go in and risk lives. I think what China are trying to go for is more of a political strategy to be able to get what they want and have some benefit to Afghanistan and to Iran, but mainly for their benefit would be the number one picture here. So in terms of that, I don't think so, but definitely China is making moves well before the crisis that we're seeing now in this month of August. Okay, so keep this in your mind again. We have the Wakhan corridor is a remote border, 60 to 70 kilometers. Okay, it stretches all the way directly into Kabul, the capital. And then from Kabul, it also goes to a very important place, which is another capital or a very large city, Kandahar. And then from Kandahar to Iran. All right, and now from here, all of these, well, this straight route is a very straight route, would require money. Now, again, with Afghanistan, as we talked about the economy, in order for Afghanistan to be able to have any cooperation here, or for them to be able to access their wealth, they're going to need a creditor nation like China with deep pockets to be able to give them the money to be able to start to build and form some sort of strategic partnership here. Okay, so this is where we are at the moment. Now, I want to just show you one more thing before I show you where China is in terms of its strategic partnership. And for me to do that, I'm going to zoom out for a moment. Now, ignore my lines and let's look over further west. Now, Iran, okay, I'm going to draw some lines here, would only really be doing business towards the east, okay, of in this South Asia pocket here. And the reason is because of religious tensions. Okay, Saudi Arabia, one of the most revered sites in terms for the Muslim religion, okay, follows a form of Islam called Sunni Islam, which is the majority Islam. Now, Iran has a different version of Islam called Shia. And because of this reason, they are in very bitter tension with each other. So we wouldn't see Iran really doing a business deal. So in other words, Iran doesn't have too many friends in the world because of US sanctions to do with nuclear power. China really is on the side of Iran. And so they're making friends together. But Iran doesn't have that many friends when it comes to a political relationship. And so Iran also seeing what's happening in Afghanistan will be watching carefully to see how the hands of China move and what they can do to make sure they get some good business towards the east. Okay, now Afghanistan, as I've said to you, and I showed you the document from 2007 to 2010, Afghanistan has enough lithium to be the Saudi Arabia of lithium. Now, Saudi Arabia, if you're not too sure, their number one export and almost their only export is oil. So if Afghanistan has that much lithium sitting within its reach, potentially, if China can bring money in, then Afghanistan could also be the new Saudi Arabia and allow Iran to push towards the east even further and towards the northeast to do business. So this is where we are right here. And this is the political structure, which is very important to understand when it comes to China and where it's moving to. So first of all, let's have a look at, we'll do in chronological order. Let's have a look at what happened in terms of the deal with China. So if I go over right here and we have a look at what happened between Iran and China. So between Iran and China right here, okay, if we look towards the first line of this heading, Iran and China signed a 25-year cooperation agreement. Now, this cooperation agreement, what is this based on? All right. Now, I'm going to scroll down here, and this is written by Reuters from Dubai. China and Iran both subject to US sanctions, and here's the key. Now, they've both been rejected by, to be honest, the larger world West community. They're both under US sanctions, but at the same time, okay, they are working together. So they've been rejected from the West, but now it's pushed them to work together. And they've signed a 25-year cooperation agreement on Saturday to strengthen their long-standing economic and political alliance. Now, you have to understand, of course, China's form of what they call democracy and Iran are very similar. Now, of course, China is more of an atheist nation, whereas Iran is more of a God-believing nation towards Islam. Okay, now here's the notes. Relations between the two countries have now reached a level of strategic partnership, and China seeks to comprehensively improve relationships with China. And Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi was quoted by Iran's state media as telling his Iranian counterpart, Mohammad Javad Zarif, "Our relations with Iran will not be affected by the current situation, but will be permanent and strategic." Okay. And this situation is to do with things around America nuking and killing one of Iran's generals and the turmoil that caused from that. Now, what we've seen here, okay, looking at everything that's going on, Iran and China have a very strategic relationship. And when we look at the geography of the countries, Afghanistan really is the missing link that could bridge that gap to make things even more lucrative. Now, bringing it into more further time, I want you guys to also see this. I want to show you what we saw when it comes to the Taliban, because now we know that in Afghanistan, the Taliban really is, okay, the main force in the country at the moment. Okay, and we will talk about forces as well, because there is also another force that is arising, and we have to take into consideration that aspect also. All right, so let's have a look here. I've kept this here for you guys so that you can see it fresh from the press. All right, so first things first, I just want to show you this one line and a few things. So China pledges support for Taliban in landmark invitation to Beijing. Now it says in subheading, militants invited to foreign ministry in Beijing in first official meeting with an overseas government since major offensive launched in May. Okay, so right here, China has made a very strategic movement by inviting the Taliban. Now, the Taliban is a militant and also a political structure. Now, this is well before we've seen the chaotic scenes that we're seeing now with Afghanistan. Now, with China doing what they've done right here, they've, in a sense, legitimized the Taliban to China and its allies to some degree. Some may, of course, have their differences because of what they've seen from what we talked about with Taliban 1.0. But however, the fact that China has invited them, I believe, is a very strategic partnership. And to me, I personally think that they foresaw what was going to happen in terms of the US withdrawal plan. So seeing what we have here, I am really convinced that China is making a very strategic move here to move into Afghanistan, but they know that bullets cannot kill an ideology, but rather it's going to be a change of mindset, which will require political alliances. And so this is why I'm saying to you that we need to keep our eyes on China, Iran, and Afghanistan, because we could see something here. Now, for the financial markets, for stocks, very simply put, if China is able to strike deals in Afghanistan, which will be very lucrative and very long-standing, we could see very interesting things happen around stocks and Chinese stocks for the future, and possibly new companies born or new services born, which will be opportunities for stocks also. Okay, so this is why I'm keeping my mind very clear as to what's going on. So this article, all right, and I think it's blocked because I didn't sign in, but it's okay, I will sign in another time. But this is not the main point. What I want you guys to see here is this iconic picture of the co-founder of the Taliban, Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, with the Chinese foreign minister Wang Yi. Okay, now, of course, towards the West, many people are not fans of the Taliban because of the ideology and what is brought to the Western world and to Western countries. But we've seen China taking this frontal role. So I want you guys to keep this picture in your mind and really see what is going on here to understand where we are. Now, I'm going to go back to Google Earth and I want to show you something here, which is very important. Now, again, the positive side is that from the strategic movements that are taking place with Afghanistan, China, Iran, and etc., Afghanistan will be able to have an opportunity to be lifted from its poverty in the right circumstances, which will be great for the people. Okay. And I want you to keep that in your mind here. Again, I'm not being biased. I'm just speaking facts. If you guys have your opinions, for sure, please share. Now, I'm going to bring up my drawing board here and I want to show you something. Now, towards the north here, all right, primarily where we see these countries, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Tajikistan meet, we have something here, which is the north, all right? Now, it's not just the north. in this area, we have a resistance or is anti-Taliban. I want you to know this. So this region in the north is anti-Taliban. And the name of this force, okay, some of you may know, and some of you, this will be all new to you. The name of this force here, the anti-Taliban force, is called the Northern Alliance, okay? So the Northern Alliance, okay, is a force which is based in what we call the Panjshir Valley, near the mountains and the hills region in this area right here, approximately. And they do not believe in the ideology of the Taliban and their political stance, especially. So Northern Alliance. Okay. Now, many of them are still Muslim, is more they don't believe in the way that the Taliban carry out their stance and they want to express leadership. Okay. So the Northern Alliance is the only resistance to, first of all, China's plans, Iran's meeting up here. So I'm going to connect this here. The only resistance to this is the Northern Alliance. Okay. And I want to color this up so you guys can see this very clearly. Now, the Northern Alliance is made up of groups towards the north. Okay. And their responsibility to them is to resist the Taliban and never allow the country to be handed over to them. Now, there's two notable figures from this region, okay, that are important to the situation here. In order for China to be able to get into this stage that we've been talking about, which is to harvest Afghanistan and be able to create a connective road towards Iran to continue their journey and their vision of the new Silk Road, they're going to need to make sure that there's a singleness of mind or an overpowering of one political party against another. And at the moment, the Northern Alliance are not giving up. Now, this area in the Panjshir Mountains and valleys have never been overrun. The Taliban have never been able to defeat it. Neither have the US has also been able to take occupancy there. Okay, it's a very standalone place. Okay, and it described by some news media a bastion in the mountains. Okay, which I do agree with. So I want to show you guys these two figures to understand where we are now. Again, remember, in order for this plan to work between China and Iran, for the strategy to work, there needs to be at least peace in Afghanistan to the point, or an overdominance of one force to allow for China to at least have two things. Now, in order for China to be able to, because they do have the money out of all of these groups here, they have the deepest pockets. In order for them to be able to allow Afghanistan to potentially realize their wealth, and of course for China to benefit primarily too, there's going to be two things they need. And the two things are here. I'm going to write this here. Number one, let's choose a different color. I'm going to choose something that stands out. So number one, first thing they're going to need is transportation. Now, transportation is not the most difficult thing for them to get. All right. The biggest thing that the biggest thing that will be a very big stumbling block would be security. Okay. Security. Each country, okay, each sect is not going to care about what China thinks. Okay. Taliban is not really going to care what China thinks unless it's beneficial or there's going to be some sort of symbiotic relationship. If not, it doesn't really matter. Now, because of the dangers, of course, of the infighting between the Northern Alliance and the Taliban, China will not be able to get into Afghanistan to be able to do any work. Now, China have already struck deals. I've talked about this already. They've struck at least one known deal, which is to explore the copper mines of a place called Ainyak, or I hope I'm saying it right. It's a 30-year lease that was from 2007, all right, to mine this. So it's not an ownership, but rather just a lease. And also India, okay, too. But there is a lot more wealth that could potentially be actualized if there was peace. Okay, now this Ainyak contract for China to explore here, the US and the other coalition forces have been the ones that have provided enough stability and peace for those 20 years to allow for China to even step a foot in there to the degree that it would be. Now that there's unrest and the US has stepped out of the picture and the allied forces with them, now China is going to have to figure out how to get the transportation and security locked down. Okay, now with the Northern Alliance, they said, and I'm going to show you in a moment that they said that they won't give up. So let's have a look at this. I've spoken about it enough. Let's have a look and see exactly what we're talking about here when it comes to this Northern Alliance. So 2 names that you want to remember, one is Saleh and the other is Masood. Now, Saleh and Masood, okay, are Afghan leaders and they're challenging the Taliban, as Al Jazeera reports. Okay, now, ex-Vice President Amrul Saleh and Ahmed Masood have relocated to the Panjshir Valley, calling for resistance against the Taliban. Now, Amrul Saleh, okay, he's the ex-vice president to the ex-president, Mr. Ghani, excuse me. Now, according to an article in 2004 of the Afghani constitution, he has named himself the president. So at the moment, in legal terms of the legal structure before the Taliban have moved into Kabul to reassume power, he is calling himself the president. Now, this figure here, Amrul Saleh, a 32-year-old, very brave man, is standing against the Taliban, just like his father did. Now, let's go back down here to read a little bit of this. So, Panjshir Valley, all right, surrounded by the high peaks of the Hindu Kush, north of Kabul, is living up to its history as a bastion of resistance as 2 Tajik leaders, okay, Ahmed Masood and Amrul Saleh, sent out their call for anti-Taliban resistance there. Now, Saleh is defiant, declaring himself the acting president of the country after President Ashraf Ghani fled the country from the Taliban's dramatic entry into Kabul, as we've spoken about, okay? And he has called his followers to converge in Panjshir to fight the Taliban. Now, Saleh, who served as the first vice president since February 2020, had been a member of the anti-Taliban North resistance in the 1990s, along with Masood's father, the late Ahmed Shah Masood. Okay, Ahmed Shah Masood is known as the Lion of Panjshir. I hope I'm saying it right. After he successfully defended the area against this, and listen to this, guys, the Soviet-Afghan War, and he later, in the Northern Alliance, led fierce resistance against the Taliban until he was assassinated by Al-Qaeda in September 2001. So the man we're talking about here has left an imprinted image of never to give up. So as I was discussing about political peace, I believe Afghanistan is far from this and possibly never going to be able to have peace. So here is Ahmed Masood, okay? And I want you here to hear this. He said, I write from Panjshir Valley today, ready to follow my father's footsteps with the Mujahideen fighters. Now, if you're not too sure what the Mujahideen is, this was the guerrilla force, okay, which overcame or fought with the help of the CIA to be able to overcome the then power in place, which was a Soviet form of government, okay? And he says something here, which is key. He said, we have stores of ammunition and arms that we have patiently collected since my father's time because we knew this day might come. Now, he added, however, the forces, which reportedly number more than 6,000, would need international support. And he called for aid from France, Europe, and the US and the Arab world, saying that they helped in their father's fight against the Soviets and the Taliban 20 years ago. So this is interesting. He said he's prepared to fight, but Masood said he still hoped he could hold peaceful talks with the Taliban. Now, here again, I'm going to insert this. Now, the Taliban 1.0, are known to be fighters more than political people. In really, from what we saw over the last 20 years and beforehand, even down to 1996 and before, the Taliban speak with bullets, hardly ever in words, only until the job is done. So if the Taliban 2.0 is really going to be the face that they're claiming to be to the world, this is going to be probably the largest test for us to see what happens. If the Taliban 2.0 say that they prefer to have peaceful talks than to fight, that'll be a very interesting change. And I believe that a lot of the world will be shocked by this. And I think a lot of the Western leaders will be shocked by this, because at the moment, this is going to be their biggest fight, because the Taliban does not like resistance. I guess as any political system wouldn't want to have any resistance to them. But if they decide to hold peaceful talks instead of resulting to fighting, then this may be a completely new Taliban according to, or this will be a major step in the world accepting the Taliban as different. Okay, so this is where we are right now. And he said one line which is important here. He said, we do not want to break out into war. So even though he's prepared to fight, he's more wanting to at least have terms that they can agree on to work out exactly what can and cannot be done together until they come to a conclusion. So this is where we are here. And for me, looking at the Northern Alliance, there is one thing I want to show, and I'm going to use the map to show it, when this is my own potential thoughts. Now, I don't know if this is going to be covert or overt. We won't know. Okay, but one thing I want to say, and I'm going to use markings one more time. So with the markings here, Kazakhstan, okay, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan are all bordering to the north-hand side of the world, Afghanistan, or of this picture. Now, Russia, okay, personally, have been fighting against the Taliban for a very long time. They do not like their beliefs and do not like how their structure is in terms of their way that they carry out politics. Now, there is a theory here, okay, and this is interesting to see, is that there possibly could be strengthening coming, possibly even from Russia, in terms of aid, in terms of guns and support. Maybe not physical support in that sense of like soldiers, but possibly there could be help coming from the north. Why is this? Every country is always seeking for the benefits of themselves first, or every good country should be seeking for the benefits of their people and for the government. Okay, now, although there is a very far distance before you even get to something like Kazakhstan, Russia is not too far away. And I don't believe that they would want any trouble to be spilling over onto their shores, especially after the long fight that they've fought with the Taliban. So possibly they may come in and strengthen towards the north and provide some sort of aid in some way to help the Northern Alliance fight if it comes down to that, because it will help the Northern Alliance, but also help them to keep the Taliban towards this region here in Afghanistan, towards Pakistan, instead of on their shores somehow. Because there have been Taliban who have managed to reach all the way over to Russia. And this is how the problem really started with them for the more recent war that they've had to fight. So these are my thoughts here. And I'm going to be very intrigued to see how we move forward from here and what happens with the Taliban. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Money Mike's episode 1. And I hope to see you in episode 2. If you enjoyed this, please leave a comment in the description below. Send me a message, tell me what you liked, what you didn't like, what I can improve on. And I'll catch you guys very, very soon. Take care, and I'm out.